Thanks for joining us on another episode of Artist Spotlight, the podcast. I'm your host, Mitch Stringer, and this episode I'm joined by South Africa-based wildlife photographer Marlon du Toit. Marlon is a fascinating guy. He's not only a phenomenal photographer, just a great guy who's become a close friend over the last many years, and he has evolved his photography and his style to become a multi-product brand influencer. He's a father, and he's just a really great guy, and I think that comes through in the interview. What was really special is that Marlon and I were in South Africa together, photographing throughout the Sabi Sands Reserve, and we were able to sit down in my cabin and just talk about wildlife photography and just a lot of good information, a lot of background on what it takes to be a wildlife photographer. You know, the weather's always different, the wildlife is always different, and just the environment in which you're shooting. And Marlon is really just incredibly talented. So I hope you enjoy this conversation. You can sit back and listen. It is rare and a treat when I can be on location to do these. It just doesn't always work out that way, but this was one of those moments, and we had a phenomenal time together. As always, the podcast brought to you by your friends at the Maryland Photography Alliance. You can jump online at mdphotoalliance.org and see all that is going on with the Alliance. Lots of contests, upcoming events, speakers, and just general good information that I invite you to check out. So without further ado, sit back, relax, and listen to my talk with Marlon du Toit. We join you from South Africa today at Mala Mala Private Game Reserve, which is an incredibly beautiful place, about an hour flight out of Johannesburg, South Africa, and incredible from a wildlife photography perspective, mixed in potentially with landscape photography. And I'm joined by a good friend of mine, a worldwide renowned photographer, Marlon du Toit. He is my guest, and before we launch into my interview with Marlon, just some housekeeping items. A reminder that all of the podcasts are brought to you by your friends at the Maryland Photography Alliance. You can feel free to check that out, and you can see what sort of contests are going on and things that are happening in the weeks and months to come. We hope you check it out. It's a lot of fun. So with that, I'd like to welcome Marlon to the podcast.
Thank you, Mitch. Thank you to all the listeners. Great to be here on the show with you. And I'm your guest while you are my guest at the same time, which is interesting.
Yeah. I met Marlon 9 years ago, and we went together to Zambia, to South Luangwa, and it was an incredible experience. We found leopard everywhere, and just an incredible time. And, you know, Marlon's background at a high level is he is a wildlife photographer. He's also someone who, through his company Tanda Afrika, leads photographic tours throughout the African continent, as well as Brazil, India, and other countries now, and other countries that'll be added in the future. And we'll certainly jump into that. So I guess my first question is, I'm sure people say you have the best job in the world. And how often do you hear that, and what do you respond with, and then what do you think to yourself when they ask you that?
Daily. I think because of the exposure on social media and the content you share, you are reminded of that on a regular basis. And I think it's the romantic side of it. It's what people see, and it's to an extent probably what I want people to see. I want people to see the magnificence of the places I get to visit, the animals I get to see. And certainly social media has driven that concept. But the reality is it's still a job like everyone has, a 9 to 5. Mine is a 3:30 to 10 p.m. Almost daily. And the fortunate thing is that I love what I do, and that's very important for me. So whilst it is a job and people don't always get to see the hard work that goes on behind the scenes, I don't mind putting in the hard work in order to give me the lifestyle that I have. It's been well chosen. It's been a lifestyle that I've been pursuing since probably the mid 2006, 2007. Made the decision to be where I am. Even before meeting my wife, and she'll tell you the same thing. I said to Lorette that, one day this is going to be part of what we do. There's going to be travel. There's going to be time away from home. Are you happy to commit to that? And, we often speak about that. And we both knew that my life would involve travel, hopefully a little bit less in future. But I'm truly grateful for, the people that travel with me, the platform that I have at the moment to share awareness of the places I get to visit. And yeah, certainly people do envy what I do. And I'm grateful for that because it gives me a platform to share what I do and to impact people's lives, all ultimately for the good of the wildlife that I get to see.
I know that because we're friends that you expose your kids to a lot of wildlife. They have the opportunity to go out onto safari. What was it in your earliest years that got you out into the bush and number one, I suppose, being comfortable with wild animals? Most people, would go to see a lion or a tiger, and there's an appropriate level of concern about that. But maybe talk about your beginnings and your first introduction to wildlife.
Yeah, well, much the same as what my kids are experiencing and getting out to go see these animals. I had the same with my dad. I grew up, as the crow flies, maybe 100 miles from here, probably even less, further north of here. Pretty much as a part of the Kruger National Park, our little town. It wasn't a big town or city at all, and due to the proximity to Kruger National Park and many game reserves, we got to spend a lot of time in there. And my dad, although he was a civil engineer by trade, had a massive passion and love for wildlife and being out in the field. And so he, during the early 80s, started a safari company. And he hosted many clients, international clients, mostly on safaris through Kruger National Park, places like Sabi Sabi, Tanda Afrika, Mala, that were in existence. Even where we are now, Mala has been around since 1963. And, my dad first introduced me to parks like this when I was very, very young. And on many occasions, I would go with him, I'd jump in the cars with him, spend a bit of time with him in the field. And literally from those days, I was sold hook, line, and sinker on doing something involved with nature. There's never a day came by that I either didn't want to be in the field, with camera in hand, something to do with nature, or a rock star. Was the two things I most wanted to be as a kid. And I had a short career in a band many, many years ago, but slight deviation, and I was back to where I am now and what I'm doing today. So, much thanks to my dad, my family, just the little town I grew up in. It was just natural that there was a lot of exposure with wildlife, a lot of time spent in the bush. My dad was a keen photographer, and ever since I started guiding, pretty young on, from about the age of 19, the one thing I wanted to do was photograph wildlife, and I started young with a camera. I guess professional gear probably about 16 or 18 years ago, and just getting better at it, working on social media, and but again, all stemming from the fact that my dad had such a love for it, and this is a continuation of that from a young age.
With you leading these photographic tours all over, and with a tremendous amount of it within the African continent, you're photographing a lot of animals that the animals themselves are not controversial, but the way in which conservation views the animals, be it the Save the Elephants, or whether it's the African, the wild dogs, or pangolin, and there's so many very critical issues that wildlife faces, and the pressure that really we as humans place on it. So what sort of education along those conservation lines do you try to convey to guests who join you, as well as just those who are curious about, what they hear and then what the reality is on the ground?
Yeah, that's a good question, because there are people who are doing a great job with conservation issues, and putting life on the line, and putting money where their mouth is, and really doing actively what they say they do. For me, that's certainly a place I want to get to. There's a lot of conservation photographers, I feel, out there who hide behind the name of a conservation photographer, but ultimately don't do all that much for wildlife. And I think I would like to find myself in the shoes of being more active with exactly that topic that you bring up. It's important. at the moment, I always try and use my social media platforms, my safaris, to tell stories. I mean, you've been with me on safari, Mitch, and I love spending time with wildlife. I love interpreting what they're doing. I love their behavior, the characteristics, the things they do, why they do it, digging deeper, and hoping that people would get a sense of that and fall in love with an animal that they're viewing with me. On social media, my job is to tell stories, to take great pictures that evoke emotion, that draw people in, that stop people from scrolling. I think that is what I try and do through my photography. And thankfully, video has come up in the last few years, and I find that's just an extension of that. It gives you an even greater possibility and opportunity to share something. I mean, the other day I was watching a mother elephant and a calf trying to cross the calf fell into mud and try to get across this muddy pond. Mother climbed in, helped it through, guided it with her tail. Took about 10 minutes, and eventually the cub was out. But the story of that, people would often just look past the finer details, like how the mother would use her tail to push her baby towards her. I've never seen it before, but I was able to interpret that. And through video, through a story on social media, and the video got over 3 million views, and people now have a greater understanding of just how intricate a life of an elephant is. And the next step for me would be we're working on that through my company, to start a fund of sorts to contribute physically in terms of finance and resource to organizations, to support the teams on the ground, anti-poaching units, and to make a bigger difference. But certainly something that I want to do more of, and hopefully I'm doing some at the moment.
You are a Johannesburg, South Africa resident, and you fly naturally from there to wherever you go to lead your workshops and do photography. I think that there are many who may not understand how coming to various countries within Africa to pursue wildlife photography as a hobby or something you enjoy not only benefits the person coming to have that experience, but in most cases benefits the local tribes who have been here for hundreds, if not thousands of years. So it's not really a corporate situation that is benefiting to the loss, so to speak, of the locals. The locals actually, in most instances, are vested stakeholders in the visitors coming. Can you maybe touch on how they benefit the communities when we all come to camps like this and others?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Mala Mala is a great example. It's owned by the community. The land is community owned. They live around the reserve, and fortunately they directly benefit from Mala Mala. The franchise Mala Mala, the lodges, the name, the branding, that's owned by Mala Mala, but the community benefit on a monthly basis from the revenue from this reserve. They're actively involved in marketing. And the offices, they get given opportunities to work within the company, to work with staff, everyone from maintenance to gardeners to top level management, and everyone has a position to grow within the business. And the goal, I guess, for Mala Mala would be to see that happen more and more, and they're upskilling people from the neighboring communities to step into roles, to open new camps, to do the design, and there's so much development happening, which is fantastic. So it's a great model, and seen across Africa, be it from staff working there or community-driven projects, schools, clinics, hospitals, health benefits. There's a lot that these lodges should be doing and are doing with revenue generated. It's not just profit going into pockets. Because if you don't do that, if you exclude the community, you're set up for failure. The community is the buffer and the boundary into these wildlife reserves. And if they don't see the benefit, if you didn't see the benefit of what your city was doing, if you were excluded and you're paying tax and you're living next door and you're not seeing anything in return, it kind of upsets you. And that's the same here. And more troublesome in rural areas. So, if you go to reserves in East Africa and the community have cattle and they look inside the reserve and it's green pastures and they have land and they've got nothing, no crops. It's to an extent, they don't always have the training or the abilities or the expertise to grow crops on themselves and understand that cattle should feed in some blocks more than others and cycle it through. And it's your job to to showcase that, to help them, to upskill them, to train them, to teach them ways, because it allows wildlife and people to live side by side. And if that's out of balance, if wildlife are encroaching on crops and animals are seen as a problem, elephants raid crops or lions come and kill cattle, there's not a chance that they're going to try and save the animal. They're going to retaliate. Often it's the worst outcome for the animal, because the community have no benefit from what you're busy doing with your business. But if the community, got a percentage of profit, or they understood through investment into their villages and in their community the benefit of what you're doing and how good this lodge is and how important lions are, because people pay millions of dollars annually to come and see them, that's a different story. And that's conservation and action, and the community with their involvement ensure that these areas succeed. And one last thing, even in this reserve where we're sitting at the moment, the community has been integral, like very, very important in terms of poaching, because to get into the reserve, you have to go through the community. They recognize strangers, they recognize patterns, suspicious behavior, and they'll catch you, they'll report you. Many poachers have been found within these communities, because many of the staff, there must be 45 lodges in this reserve. And if there's 50 people working at each of these lodges, that's a large portion of the community. So, and their families benefit, so it's to their importance and to their best interest that they are looking out for these poachers. And it's been very successful. So community, wildlife, if it doesn't go hand in hand, I'm afraid that, that's not the future that we're looking for, and it's not sustainable.
What do you think that for people who have not made the trip to, whether it's an African country or any of the other locations that you go, what do you think the most common misconceptions are for the first time traveler who's considering a trip and wants to know, is it safe? Am I going to, quite simply get eaten by something? What do you think some of those questions are that you get from potential guests?
Yeah, that is a valid question, and I think it varies from one region to another. But I think for America, certainly, I visit often and deal with many first-time clients, and I think they are truly surprised from the fact the moment they arrive in Johannesburg and land, at Tambo International. It's a huge airport, and they see the size and scale of Johannesburg, and that already is a surprise. And I think definitely the misconception lies, a big part of it lies there, and just the infrastructure that Africa has. From Kenya to southern African cities, it really is a lot more advanced than what you think, and a lot safer than what you think. These reserves, you can fly into the reserve we're in right now without ever going into Johannesburg. You can arrive, get on a private plane, and land right on this reserve's private airstrip. And I think that certainly is one part. Just the fact that I think Africa is often considered this dark continent and a little bit scary and daunting. And it's not the case at all. South Africans are friendly. We love tourists. We understand the importance of people coming from other countries to see our wildlife and our riches and wonders. And I think for the most part, people are treated as such. But certainly from a safari point of view, I think a first-time safari goer, there's always the nerves. We've been going on game drives here at Mala Mala and at Sabi Sabi, where we don't have it's not like in East Africa where you have a top on the car. It's unroofed. It's just you sitting on the back of a car on seats with no protection. And I think initially, certainly the thought is that these animals are going to jump in. We were talking about, what if you sit on the porch and the lion walks by, and these animals have no interest in you. Definitely don't go wander around at night. That could be a different story. But yeah, certainly it's safer than what you think, and people are happy to see you here for sure.
From just making a turn here specifically on your work from a photography standpoint, what animals do you like photographing the most?
Whichever's in the best sunlight.
Spoken like a true photographer.
If it's posing for me, I'll take a photo of it. But yeah, I think fortunately, having traveled through some international destinations too, I've been able to see more wildlife and different animals. And within Africa, I love male lions. I love spending time with lions and prides. They're so dynamic and there's so much on the go. I love photographing leopards. They're beautiful females with those big eyes and long whiskers. Big elephant bulls are great to spend time with. We've been to the Pantanal together, and jaguars are on another level. Those cats are incredibly active, so photogenic, and just give you a lot of time behind the lens, capturing great moments. I'm about to leave to the Himalayas, where photography, yes, you probably don't have such a high photo count by the end of a trip looking for the elusive snow leopard, but it's an experience that's had a profound impact on me. And this African boy who loves hot weather is about to go sit in minus 35 with very big boots and jackets and all those kind of things. And but I love it. I love seeing that cat, even if it's a mile away. To see that cat on the ridge line looking back at me is a feeling you get that it's tough to put into words. So yeah, for me, I think it comes with experience and the photography. I think when the two things marry one another, when you know there's something special that's happened, and you get to put your lens behind and onto that for me is where the magic happens.
I know we'll get this question, so I'll go ahead and ask it. All the brands of cameras now are so good, so much better than they were even 5 or certainly 10 years ago. So from the standpoint of equipment, what sort of lenses are you bringing into the field for different reasons and maybe different locations to give listeners, a sense of that? And while someone may say, "Oh, I don't have this lens or that lens," nowadays renting lenses is easy. That's not really difficult at all. More so, the question being, what do you take into the field to capture the images you do?
Yeah, that's a great question, and something I discuss with all guests before a trip, and often get asked online. Because it's your arsenal. It's what you're taking with to get these moments. You travel far and wide, and I'm a telephoto prime kind of guy. I love fixed lenses. I've shot on fixed lenses for 12 or 13 years, and I just love the quality that you get and the performance from them. So I own a 600 f4, a fixed 600 f4, I own a 400 f2.8. Soon going to get a 300 f2.8, and depending on where I'm going, you got to consider the distances you're going to be shooting at. Can you off-road or can't you off-road? What kind of transport? Are you going to be in a small enclosed area? And there's a lot of things to take into consideration. The most versatile lens for me is my 400 f2.8. It's a great lens for wildlife photography. And if you look at my style of photography, I love capturing animals within an environment. I love including a little bit of environment as opposed to being too tight. So even in places like Indian national parks or the Pantanal or Patagonia, what a shame to be in a place like Patagonia with a mountain lion or puma in your sights and you don't include the mountains and Torres del Paine in the background. So for me, that's always the goal, and which is why I love the 400. Zoom lenses are great for that, and the lenses today are very good. A lens like 100 to 400 is a lens that I often travel with because it just gets the job done. It's of great quality. They're all, it's either G Master lens or L series lens or Z series. They're all top end lenses. So they, in terms of weather and how well they're sealed, they're as good as the top end pro lenses. So it's a great lens to travel with. I always have a 7200. I think that's like the holy grail lens. And if you don't have one, you got to get one. I take the 7200 wherever I go. So the telephoto lens I'll vary depending on destination. But the 7200 is in the bag. It hardly leaves because you will need it and you will use it and it will get you great photos. And then I always take a wide. And, a wide angle lens I use the least. It's tough to get close enough to the animals I photograph without being eaten, which, I try not to whenever I can. But it's the kind of lens where if you need it and you don't have it, you'll regret it because those moments are few and far between. Actually getting close enough to an animal to use a lens as wide as a 16 to 35. And I remember last year we were in the Chobe River and we were going to focus on birds. But I took the 16-35 with hardly a good lens for bird photography. But we found these elephant bulls in the middle of the Chobe River. And I lay down on the front of the boat and asked my boat driver, get me as close as you can. And, well, I was close. I was about 1.5 meters away from this elephant with my camera hanging down low. I only had one shot because the elephant completely wet us with, he was busy cleaning vegetation, and we were drenched. My camera was soaking wet, and I couldn't, I had to clean the lens, and by that time the elephant moved off. But the first few shots that I got was well worth taking that lens with us. And so that's my kit bag, always a wide 72, and it goes in without fail. And then I choose between usually a 400 or a 600. Sony recently introduced the 300 f2.8. It's so light, so versatile, and I've been shooting with it for about 3 weeks, and I can see that going with me on a more regular basis.
You and I have talked about this subject over the years. You have had photos of yours published in books and magazines and so forth, but as you've built this incredible catalog of images, where do you see them finding the light of day on a broad scale someday?
Don't know. Hopefully something happens soon. No, I mean, I would love, I think it's every photographer's dream to have a book, to see a book up on a shelf, in major stores, and that would certainly be a dream, to get these images printed. And the last few years have taken time away from me in pursuing projects like that because of my new business that I've started, and it's been very time and labor intense. But I think in the next 2 years, I'll get to a point where I will publish a book. It'll be a great achievement and something I'd really look forward to. It's a big task, and hopefully connect with the right publishers, and that's a whole new time-consuming journey that I'll be going on. But social media, I guess, is a good platform where it does reach an audience. But other than that, at the moment they're sitting on hard drive, sadly. But I would love, the next project for me would definitely be a book, Mitch. That's definitely a dream. Yeah.
It was not that long ago at all that you were in New York City and you were a guest on the Jimmy Fallon show, and he really seemed to have a connection to what you were talking about, and really had tremendous, very genuine interest in what you were talking about. And I guess my question is, what do you think drives the fascination that people have with, number one, wildlife, and number two, wildlife that is not within their day-to-day experience, something that they would have to go to a zoo to see, if a zoo would even have some of the animals that you see on a almost daily basis?
Yeah, again, a good question, and that's why people are on social media and why people follow animal pages and funny animals and cute animals. And I think we, even at the deepest level, we resonate with animals. I think we are connected to animals, and it shows in how people react. And I think there's a human side to it. And if you post a very tender moment where a mother lioness is grooming her and taking care of her cub, there's something in there that just makes you invites you into that moment. And if there's a moment of I share sometimes a little bit of graphic content, and graphic in the sense that an animal killing another animal, I don't shy away from that. And the response is often the opposite, it's very angry, and it makes people very upset to see another animal die. And I mean, these are people that have never been on a safari, possibly never even seen wildlife in a zoo, but are intrinsically linked to animals, in one way or another. You don't want to see one die. You feel connected to an animal when you meet it for the first time. I see it on safari. People come here, they want to pet them, they want to climb off and touch the lion, and there's just something there, and I can understand it, because you feel a bond with these animals when you come on safari. Even if you've never been on a safari, your first time, it feels like you're home. There's something about Africa that it just feels like home, like and when you leave, it keeps a part of you. And the animals have a big role in that journey. They've played a big role. And like opportunities like the Jimmy Fallon show, the Tonight Show, showcasing work on there, seeing how people respond to it. It's just all a part of that. I think I cannot imagine a world without animals, which is why conservation is so important. To lose an animal like a rhino or an elephant, we look at the northern white rhinos. There's 2 left. How we were able to get to a point where there's so few left, and it's sad. And I think people do take the time to pay attention to those things, but just not realizing perhaps always how dire the situation is for wildlife out there. I deviate a little bit, but yeah, that for me, and even I get emotional about it because it is, I connect with these animals. I look at them every day. I get to see them through my lens. I edit pictures. I connect with their eyes. I look into their souls on a daily basis, and being able to share that and seeing the reactions, whether it's an animal dying or a mother taking care of a baby, people definitely care about wildlife, and I think it's deeper perhaps than what we always understand. Maybe there's something from a long time ago that when we weren't in our homes but we were living among them, maybe still resonates with us and stays in there.
We had over the past couple days two very different experiences, which I think drives home kind of this question, and that is, we came upon a scene the other day with some lions, and they were lying around, to use a real bad dad joke. But if you wait, sometimes a half an hour, sometimes an hour, sometimes longer, based on your knowledge of animal behavior, very often you're rewarded for that patience and that waiting. Today we came upon a leopard at the base of a tree who had caught an animal, had hoisted that animal up in the tree to keep it out of the way of other predators who want to steal it away. And the decision was made, we should probably wait and see if that leopard would go up the tree, which is a dramatic image. That didn't actually happen today, but 2 different days, both cases we wait, one pays off photographically, the other doesn't. Talk about patience and how critical patience is in wildlife photography, maybe more, in my opinion, than any other type of photography.
Yeah, it's you cannot do this successfully if you're not patient, if you don't give these animals time. It's which is why I love reserves like this, because you have time. I mean, over the last couple of days, we were in many of these sightings the only vehicle sitting there waiting. There was no crowds of people, no one interfering in the animal's behavior. We were a fly on the wall watching this leopard this morning, and there's no doubt that she went up. I mean, her food is up in the tree at some point, and it gives you a great sense of appreciation for great photographs, because there are many fantastic photographs out there, and I don't think people often realize the work and that people put in. Hours and hours, and the money to get to these destinations, and the time spent, and it could take days, it could take years before you see your first leopard kill. I mean, we saw a leopard killing 2 impalas yesterday, which is extremely rare. I can count on one hand the amount of times I've seen that across 20 years and many game drives, and we're fortunate to see it on day 6 of a 9-day safari, or day 5, and that didn't require patience. We were lucky. And I think that the great thing about safari is you can get lucky, but when you require patience, it's great to sit and wait, because and this is why I love binoculars. In that time, you also get to know the animal. You get to study what they're doing. You get to see why are they not moving. All right, it's external conditions. It's the heat. The day that leopard didn't want to go up the tree, she wanted to leave. She wanted to go drink water, but she didn't want to go drink water. There was this internal conflict, because if she had left, there was a hyena that was a problem, so she couldn't, he wanted her food. There were eagles and vultures that wanted the food, and she didn't want to relinquish that meal. So if she left, the vultures would come. If she took it down, the hyena would come. And so she was left with really nothing to do. And but again, patience showed us that. We sat there for an hour and a half, and perhaps we didn't see her go up the tree, but I think we learned some other things about that leopard, how resilient she was, how patient she was. And she sat, even though she was thirsty, even though it was hot, she had to protect her meal, most basic instinct. And so in those moments of patience, of waiting, sometimes it's a day, sometimes it's one trip to the other. You come back to this place to see a leopard climbing a tree, maybe 2 or 3 trips in, and you may get it and you may not, but it keeps us coming. And I think as your love for wildlife and photography grows, you start seeing more of it. You start learning more. You see beyond just the animal, and you're looking at behavior and certain traits, and I love that about what we do. So patience cannot go without it, and there's a lot to learn within that.
When we encounter a scene, and you've encountered just countless numbers of these, but when you have a scene that's a somewhat static scene, you have a leopard on a tree, which may do various things, including just sit there, but maybe more than that. How you can have a scene, and by using different lenses, create very different images, from one showing it in its environment to portraits to details, just from one scene that you come across. Maybe you can explain to those who are listening how to take one scene and multiply it into 4, 5, 6 different types of images.
It all comes down to storytelling. And I think for me in my photography, and it goes back to conservation and telling, trying to get people to stop for a moment, just to pause and look at the photo that I share or look at the video. It comes down to storytelling. And how do you effectively tell a story? When you go out on a safari and you see an animal, I think you are drawn into that experience emotionally and you connect with the animal. But to convey that story to an audience is very difficult, because I can take an iPhone out and take a video and tell the story. Is it effectively done? I don't know, but you're still capturing what you're seeing and trying to share that with an audience. Whether you did it well or not, you'll find out once you do share it. But we go on safari with an arsenal of lenses, with an idea, with some understanding of how to use our gear, and you just have to dissect it. You have to very quickly decide, what is the story that we are trying to tell? Is it the mother and the baby? Is it more about the baby, or is it more about mom and baby together? And what lens will best tell that? If there's a lioness grooming a cub, a 16mm probably is not going to be the right lens for that moment, unless they're lying on a rocky outcrop in the Serengeti perhaps, and where they are the star feature and they're silhouetted and everything looks good. But for the most part, you're going to have to use gear that gets you into that moment. It's an intimate moment. You don't want any distractions, so you got to get close. And more than gear, you have to think about things like aperture and depth of field, and you do want to use an f2.8 aperture, which is intimate. It's highlighting very specific moments and excluding a lot. Or do you want to shoot this at f8 or f11, which increases a lot of detail for you, and you're able to tell more, get the eyes of the mom shop and the eyes of the cub? Or do you just want the look in mother's eyes as the cubs lying at her feet? There's so much to consider if you really are wanting to tell the story effectively. And perhaps you're not going to get it right on day one as a new photographer, because you're overwhelmed by just the moment itself. And to be honest, you don't think about what lens you're shooting with. But I think as you grow as a photographer, part of that journey is to become more complex, to think about your photo more, and to think about the story ultimately. For me, the greatest photographs that I've seen, my first question was not, oh, what lens was that shot with? Or I wonder what the camera make was, or the resolution of that, or did they use Da Vinci, or did they edit that? And what that's not the question that I ask. It's the moment. I was thinking, why did that animal do that? Where was it going? I wish I was there. And those are the moments you capture through smart storytelling, and using the right equipment for the task at hand.
Part of, I think, one of what you bring to the table, aside from your eye for photography and composition, is your knowledge of the wildlife. I'm never ceasing to be amazed by your knowledge of everything from plant species to bird species to just you name it. It's amazing. I can't remember what I had for dinner 2 nights ago, and all this. It's amazing. But my question is, when you started off guiding years ago at a lodge all the way through the present, what has that been like, your sort of education from then till now, the depth of it and the breadth of your knowledge of wildlife? How do you keep it all between your ears? It's so much. How do you keep that all sorted and not lose sight of some of the details? It's amazing.
Thanks, Mitch. It's very kind of you to say, and I appreciate that very much. I think it's just, again, it's the love for what you do. I grew up in this. I've always wanted to do what I do today and more. And because of that love, it drives you to get to know these animals better. I think I'm fortunate that I've been able to travel to more places than one. I mean, many years ago, I was bound to and worked full-time in a reserve like the Sabi Sands, where we are here. And you're limited to the cats that you're dealing with. But a leopard at Mala Mala behaves differently to a leopard in South Luangwa. The cats there are more nocturnal. Yeah, you see them a lot during the day, and the behavior is different. The build is different, and And so, as you travel from one place to another, all of a sudden you get to meet a snow leopard, and then you get to see a jaguar, and you get to see a puma, and then a tiger. And you're the whole time drawing up comparisons between these animals. Why are they different? How do they behave? What are they doing? Now, I recently discovered that there's coalitions of jaguar males, which is something that has only recently come to light. And it's incredible to see, because before that, it's thought that lions are social and male cheetahs, and that's it. But now there are male jaguars of different ages that are forming coalitions and walking together, claiming territory together. That's fascinating. And I've learned that because I've been able to travel and see more animals and expose myself to different behaviors and different animals and different species. So, for me, I think it's driven by, I know I'm a wildlife photographer, and this is what I do, but I'm first and foremost those 10 or 12 years spent working as a lodge-based guide in South Africa, in Southern Africa. Those were important because that's who I still am. I think I love photography, but I'm driven by getting to know these animals better, studying behavior. And that's important as a foundation, because I can be one step ahead. I can help you, thinking, okay, this animal, like the cheetah the other day, I knew she was thirsty. I knew she would go drink. I knew it would be the last light of day. It's when she looks prettiest. And we waited, and it worked. And being even 1 second ahead, if you can pick up your camera, be ready for the shot when it happens, 1 second before she does it, that's all you need. It's a matter of 20 photos that you've been able to get. If you're a second late, you would have lost that. And so my love for what I do is it spills over into photography and working with people and trying to get them the shot and the moment and the experience. And the fact that I get to travel abroad certainly just adds to what I've already learned in Africa and with African wildlife.
Now, would you say that, when you picked up that camera as a kid unto present day, would you say that you had what you would describe as photographic influences, actual photographers that you first saw their work, and not that you necessarily tried to emulate that, but it continued to motivate you to photography? Or are there people that you've become aware of along the way that now you kind of look at and say, that's really something, the kind of work that so-and-so is doing? Or has it really just been a kind of a solo journey, self-taught, and you just went and ran with it?
Yeah, there's this guy called Mitch Stringer that certainly inspired me in many ways, and
of course, naturally.
No, it's again a good question. I think it's a bit of two sides to it. The one certainly has been a journey of self-discovery and early days. I started my photography before social media really went off, and we learned about other photographers in books and coffee table books, and that was about the only way you could see the work of other photographers. And through social media certainly has allowed us to be exposed to more photographers around the world. And I've always, I don't think I'm necessarily, I shoot in a specific style. Again, I like to tell stories and convey those moments. But I have been drawn to some photographers' work locally, certain people like Hannes Lochner, who's a good friend of mine and an amazing wildlife photographer. In early days, guys like Greg du Toit, who's also a local South African photographer. He did amazing work in film photography. I've always loved work from photographers like Nick Brandt, who it's on another side of things, monochrome and just very symmetrical but beautiful photography. And I think gleaning off other international photographers and people around me certainly helps you build a portfolio and helps you fine-tune what you're doing as a photographer. And I think it's for people listening, it's important to have those people, and even better if you have people around you that you can talk to, maybe a mentor, somebody that's ahead of you in the game and understands a little bit more about gear and destinations and being out there, and some advice. There's so much information available today on YouTube and on social media, and people are so approachable. And yeah, I think it's a good thing, having idols, having somebody to look up to, but not forgetting to don't clone other people. Don't become like them. Use what they do, but still find your own voice and find your own way of doing things.
You raised a good point, so I want to make sure that we touch on this. For people who are listening and they think, wow, this is interesting stuff, what's the best way, or what are the various ways to check out your work, not only your photography, but also see what you and Tanda Afrika are doing in terms of workshops and photo adventures around the world? What's the best place for everyone to find you?
Yeah, thanks, Mitch. By far, social media is where I'm most active in terms of my experiences that I share, and that's just Marlon du Toit. You can pronounce it du Toit if you want, but Marlon du Toit on all social media handles. And then our company is Tanda Afrika, Africa with a K, .com. That's the website, and it's where we share our experiences that we offer, our journals and blogs and so forth. But that's it. Social media and our website. That's where we are at the moment.
That's great. That's great. Well, Marlon, I really appreciate you taking the time while you and I are out here, just having a great time as we always do. I appreciate you being part of Artist Spotlight, the podcast.
Thank you, Mitch. And let's go see if that leopard's up a tree this afternoon.
Yeah, got to do that. As far as closing, want to make sure that all of you check out my website, MitchStringerImages.com, where you can not only find out what I'm up to, you can check out my blog, see photos and stories from the trip that Marlon and I are on now, as well as other photography projects that I have going on. You can also go to Mitch Stringer Images on Instagram, which is a day-by-day update on what I'm shooting and what's happening there. So feel free to do that and be in the know. Be sure to subscribe. Be sure to like the podcast. That helps us get the word out, and we always appreciate that. And with that, we'll see you next time. Until then, good light and happy shooting. Take care.